one of the original aircraft at the Shuttleworth collection in Bedfordshire. During the war, more pilots died in training than in actual battle.
3, 2, 1, go!
And the most dangerous part of all was takeoff. If the engine cut before you got airborne, the plane simply drove itself and the pilot into the ground. This was an advanced aircraft for its time, as it was built in 1917, towards the end of the war. Travelling in it today is petrifying. You really do get a sense of the risks taken by the pilots.
Flying these planes over the Western Front was phenomenally dangerous. You had ground fire coming up, enemy fighters trying to hunt you down. These early pioneers of aerial photography were men of untold courage.
It's extraordinary to think that when the First World War started, men had been flying for barely a decade. It was only in 1909 that Frenchman Louis Blériot had developed an aircraft good enough to fly across the English Channel. Just 5 years later, in August 1914, 4 squadrons of Britain's Royal Flying Corps flew back across the Channel to France. This time, they were going to fight in the Great War against the Kaiser's men. Britain's first wartime aircraft were a ramshackle collection. The technology was new and unreliable. One plane had even crashed before it reached Dover, killing both of its crew. As for the men who made it to France, flying over the Western Front would carry even more danger. Now they were targets for German anti-aircraft fire. And as I come to the end of my flight today, I can begin to understand why the life expectancy for pilots was actually worse than for men in the trenches. But there we are, terra firma at last. What an extraordinary experience. You know what I felt up there? The most amazing vulnerability. Very much so. And we were doing this on a beautiful summer's day. What was it like? In winter, with fire coming at you from every angle. What was it like for them?
Well, they were a long way up. They operated over the front lines at over 12,000 feet, so it was cold, freezing cold. There were the fighters to contend with, there was the anti-aircraft fire, so there were lots of things to contend with, as well as taking the photographs.
Which must have been pretty cumbersome if you had to lean out of this aircraft.
Indeed.
That far up.
The camera was big, the airspeed was high, you just experienced it. Although it's an old aeroplane, we're travelling at 100 miles an hour. So to hold the camera over the edge steadily enough to take a photograph of something 12,000 feet below you must have been hugely difficult.
Despite their primitive and unwieldy cameras, the Royal Flying Corps managed to take hundreds of thousands of detailed photographs. The art of interpreting aerial photographs soon became highly developed in the war. As experts scrutinized each inch of the enemy front line, life on the ground would no longer be hidden. As the war progresses, you have aerial photography, and it completely changes life for men in the trenches, because now everything can be seen from above, and there's much more accurate targeting.
Yeah, that's true, but